Ladies and gentlemen, in the blue corner, standing at a sleek 5'11", 245 pounds, the tumultuous tempest of technique, Thomas Lilly. And in the red corner, at a curvaceous 5'11", 315 pounds, the jovial juggernaut of judgment, John Cheryl Sheridan. A meeting of the masters of mastication. Turn your attention as they delve deep into all things lifting and more. This is Peak Speak.
All right. Well, we're back. Peak Speak. I don't know why I say the name of the podcast every time.
Me neither, but that's okay.
It doesn't matter.
I was brainstorming ideas for Peak Speak theme songs the other day while noodling in my music making journey. It was fun.
Noodling. What does noodling mean?
You've never heard anyone describe like playing guitar as like I just went and was noodling on the guitar for a bit?
No.
Really? I've never heard that description. I've always understood it to be just like sat down and like playing around, you know, just like noodling away.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know where it comes from, but it's just a term I've always associated with guitars.
Yeah, there you go. No, I've never heard it.
Yeah. But yes, we're back. Here we are.
How are you, my friend?
Life is pretty good. As I said to you pre-recording, parenting a sick kid all week is an oppressive experience, but currently the vast majority of my living room is taken up by a blanket fort, and he is quiet because the headphones are on and he's watching Minecraft YouTube videos on the iPad.
Amazing.
And if there's ever a better way to shut up a kid, I'm yet to find it.
Nice. What age or height or power level does a child go from being a toddler to just like a regular child?
I think it's when they can walk properly.
Okay.
Like my kid's in year 1. He's definitely not a toddler anymore. And B, we talked about this. I think there's a point where they stop toddling. They stop being like whoop, boop, 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 and they start walking. And it's probably somewhere in the like 3-4 range, I reckon, is when we stopped referring to him as a toddler, maybe.
So it's basically when the head stops becoming a massive like counterweight to the rest of their body.
Yeah, basically. When your body grows into your head.
Yes.
Yeah.
There you go.
Which is why, for the record, if you didn't already know this, folks at home, that picture that floats around on the internet about how that baby has a perfect squat is the biggest load of horseshit you will ever see, because that baby's head, and the classic description is, and you can all do this while you're sitting there listening, maybe not if you're driving, but in almost every other circumstance, take your hands, put them together over your head, and then find the youngest child you can and get them to do the same thing. And what you'll find is their hands don't touch each other. They can like barely get their hands over the top of their head. Now imagine if your head was that size, right?
Yes.
Like imagine if my head was this big. It would be fucking ludicrous. Right? That's one of those funny perspective things that people neglect, and I think is a great indicator for fitness information in general. People like taking these incredibly out of context things, pointing out that you're a bad person because you can't do it like this, without like neglecting to mention the fact that that kid's head weighs 2/3 of its entire mass. It's great.
Did you see Angus roll the functional movement pattern people overnight or this morning or something?
Was that the one where he was crawling along the grass, or was that a different one? I don't know. I haven't watched all of Angus's latest rants.
No, he was basically just mostly taking a dig at the fact that they're making fun of squats and that you can get big legs doing other stuff and they've all got tiny legs.
Oh yeah, that's a classic one. Is people who have a movement system to sell you, telling you how you can definitely do these things with this amazing movement system, despite none of them ever having done any of those things.
Exactly. All right. What were we ranting about before we decided to
just
record?
fucking powerlifting again. Would it surprise you to know, folks, that 2 grumpy old cunts are back to rant about powerlifting for you? I feel like that's maybe where our rebrand needs to go. Grump speak.
Cloud speak.
Yeah, we could do that. You are sitting in a rocking chair.
Bro, wait. No. Let me tell you about this chair.
Tell me about the chair, Thomas.
Look at this shit.
Ooh.
Ready?
Oh my God, it's got a remote, kids.
Now massaging.
Oh, great.
So
Now we're all going to have to listen to Thomas orgasm mid-episode.
rumble. I when we were in China, we went to
A
the
chair factory. Of course you fucking did.
No, we didn't go to
Next
a
thing
chair
you know,
factory.
we're all going to get fucking zero branded, custom made,
Custom
blue
upholstered chairs.
fucking, yeah. Right. Just what I fucking need.
Our guy over there introduced us to his father-in-law who owns their factory, and his office is what you'd expect of like
A Chinese businessman who owns a factory.
Someone who thought that someone whose factory was legit like 30 years ago.
Yeah, right.
Like had a dirty fish tank with some weird fish in it and too much mess, and all the like tiles that were once exotic are kind of broken and dirty.
Yeah.
They had this chair, and I'm like, I really like that chair. The first time I went, I'm like, can I have one of those chairs? Just joking around. And they're like, yeah. And then the second time I went, I'm like, I want one of those chairs. And so they
yeah, nice.
And now I got a sick Chinese leather massaging business chair.
Yeah, nice. I actually bought a new office chair not that long ago because I tore my calf because of my last office chair. Because it was like an old secondhand chair that Sim had got that was nice, like looks nice, but was a bit too high for me. And it was in one of the weeks where I was like a bit sick. And so I was like actively avoiding work by making music. And I just fucking hyper focused my way into 4 hours of sitting in a chair that's slightly too tall for me with my heels up off the ground, like constantly plantar flexed for like 4 hours. And then I went running the next day and tore my calf. And then the next day after that, I went and bought a new office chair. It's like a fucking fancy ass gaming chair. It's like the first office chair I've had that fits my ass probably ever. It's great.
Yes.
But yeah, so we were ranting about powerlifting because that's what we do here at Peak Speak, Australia's grumpiest powerlifting podcast. And it was because we were talking about the idea of the continual kerfuffle that seems to encircle the IPF affiliates and or people who want to be related to the IPF affiliates. And the point I made was an estimate that I reckon there's probably at least 50% of the active powerlifting community in Australia, let's say, probably doesn't give a shit about the 3 letters in front of the name of the powerlifting competition, right? They're far more interested in the quality of the competitions, the people that are at them, the way it's all run, all of that kind of stuff. And yet, for some reason, there still has always been this undercurrent of people in Australia who are obsessed with the concept of the IPF and this world body affiliation, which has made very little sense to me because so few of them have ever been anywhere near competitive enough to be that enthusiastic about a very serious world affiliation while completely neglecting the concept of actually building the sport into something useful in the country they all live in, which just continues to fascinate me, right? And I said it to you off air, like, why worry about a world body when 99% of your powerlifting federation's members are never going to leave the country to compete in powerlifting, if not higher, right? Like, let's call it 99.5%. Are never going to leave the country in pursuit of competing overseas. And yet we still seem to have so many people dedicated to building federations based off that as the fundamental underpinning. And it continues to make no fucking sense to me. Why not focus on building like the best Australian powerlifting federation ever, APL, and then instead like worry about that. And then if people want to go overseas, cool, we can make opportunities for that. But yeah, it fascinates me.
I actually think that the 50% number is pretty conservative. I'd say it's
yeah, I agree.
If you look at open powerlifting and you scroll through the names, a lot of people are first-time competitors or once a year sort of recreational
recreational athletes. Yeah.
And they're just happy to compete locally and have a good supportive environment that runs a great competition.
Yeah. Like I said to you, all my lifters compete in APL because we host APL comps.
Yeah,
like that's pretty much the long and the short of it. They like competing in our gym, and so they compete in APL.
Yeah, I think it's a big part of it's sport maturity, like just being aware of what's out there. More and more just comes with time, and it's not a uniquely Australian problem. The terrible.
Yeah, that's the thing. I have no perspective on that because I've never really been involved outside of Australia, so I don't know. It feels uniquely Australian, but I'm sure it's not.
Yeah, I mean, the terrible management of the federation is a little bit more uniquely Australian, and the constant changeover of leadership is a little bit more uniquely Australian. But the overwhelming draw for no apparent media, for no apparent reason other than hype, is pretty universal. But it's actually a relatively easy thing to get past with just basic education.
Yeah.
And no, don't get me wrong. That's not to say IPF run bad comps. Of course they don't. But like the reality of, are you going to get to Sheffield is probably not. There's not many people that are going to reach that sort of pinnacle. And same thing, if you look at the IPF worlds, the likelihood of you actually getting there is probably not. And with that, then there's more options available to you. You don't have to be locked into a particular thing, which with Article 14, it can be tricky to navigate sometimes for lifters, and lifters get confused and frustrated. And I believe that the segregation caused by something like that, and its policing or mismanagement or misunderstanding, is where we lose a lot of people from powerlifting.
100%. That's the thing that I have never understood. Why the fuck are we all so protective over this idea that, like, once you're a part of us, you can't be a part of anyone else? Like, it's just so fucking stupid. And that is a very uniquely powerlifting problem, because maybe not so much. I imagine fight sports are like that because they also seem to have governing bodies in different realms like that. But nowhere else in sport do you be like, oh, can't compete with those people. They're all fucking criminals and drug takers. Instead, you just get people competing in the sport, right? And I think so much of it, from my point of view, you said sport maturity, right? I actually think it's just fucking maturity, man. Like, because I think the people continually, at least, and again, I've been fortunate not to have been involved in all of the IPF bullshit, apart from being referred to as a criminal by someone who's never met me before, multiple times. And having watched it from an external sort of realm, it strikes me that all of the people who've been in the leadership positions in this context are just incredibly insecure, immature people who are putting up all these fucking bullshit things around gatekeeping the sport. They're like, we're the ones to compete. All that shit is what's been ruining powerlifting for the 10 years I've been involved in it. And instead of having 10 years of like incredible exponential growth, because we had a few years there was a good like 5 or 6 years where it was fucking properly exponential, right? And then the last 5 or 6 years feel like it's just been this fucking bullshit infighting and continual expression of people resting on their laurels for what they've already done, and then just being like, well, this is how we always do it and this is how it works. And that for me is what's been really exciting about APL, is not having that, having people who are committed to like, no, let's do things differently and make it the sport it can be. But that has to come from maturity, right? And a sense of confidence in the product you provide. In the same way that, like I said to you before, like I don't really follow anyone else who runs powerlifting stuff in Canberra because it just doesn't actually need to be in my ecosystem. Like their decisions don't actually influence what I do. And I'm not the sort of person who's like, oh, I'm scared about what they're doing. I'm really fucking confident in the product we offer, and we continue to improve it and continue to get better with it. Speaking of which, excited for my new toaster racks. They're installed and looking mint. We did have to drill out the Burley logo and put it on the other side because we've got them facing forwards, not backwards, just because of the way the platform sits, but it looks sick.
Nice.
Yeah, like I think at least mature and confident enough in what I can do and the product we provide that I don't need to be constantly checking on what other people are doing and that kind of thing. And I also don't need to be scared about people not competing in my comps, right? Like if one of my clients said the other day, they want to compete at Capo Nuts, cool, man, let's go do that. Like I'm excited for you to do that because it's not about the federation or no, you should definitely do this. It's about the people I'm working with and them enjoying what they're getting out of it. And that's what the whole fucking sport should be about, right? It should be about the people doing it and having fun doing it, not all these cunts in leadership positions who are just more concerned about inflating their own egos and stroking their own fucking miserable existences than they are about actually genuinely growing the sport.
Yeah. And I mean, like, we can't really speak for the current IPF leadership because I just don't think it's been around long enough to make an accurate assessment. But certainly that would apply to the previous. It's interesting looking at these numbers. Just when you mentioned, the exponential growth, looking on open powerlifting as to like how many active competitors were in each year, it's pretty steady growth. And last year was the biggest year on record. Yeah. Which is cool. And now, granted, there might be missing information from open powerlifting for sure.
Yeah.
Just fun fact: 2014, Thomas Lilly was the number 20 powerlifter in the country on dots, male or female. So there you
go. Except that dots wasn't invented at that point, so you can't count that. That's not how it works, Thomas.
Doesn't matter. There's dots in the jungle. I read in a book.
There's dots in the jungle. Yeah, because the gorilla's like, wait, bro. Is this a 24-hour weigh-in or is this a 2-hour weigh-in?
That's right. I'm one spot above Les Grills, who's definitely stronger than me. So
he's definitely like 3 or 4 times stronger than you. He's a fucking freak.
There you go.
Yeah. And they say Dots is the great evener. Yeah, bullshit. In what world does Dots put Les Grills below fucking Thomas Lilly?
That was my good year. It's all downhill from there.
The last decade, been trying to chase that one experience.
Exactly, legit. It's annoying because being behind the scenes, you do see a lot more of the negative than the average punter. In all ways, shape, and I think that's why powerlifting's better than it ever has been.
Yeah, I think that's why these fucking idiots still end up with people in their federations, right? Because it's a whole bunch of people who are new to the sport, who haven't just had to deal with the relentless and oppressive bullshit that comes with the sport of powerlifting in Australia over the last decade. Maybe I'm just a bitter, jaded old prick. I'm okay with it.
Anyway, let's. You raised a good subject the other day. That'll be cool to unpack.
Yeah, I think it kind of feeds off that one, right? I had this thought. I can't actually remember what was going on at the time, but it was related to the idea of like buy-in for the training process. And I think for a long time earlier in my coaching career, I was guilty of expecting people to put in the commitment and effort to their training that I did. And the older I get, the more mature I get, because heads up, folks, you're supposed to mature as you get older. Maybe the Australian powerlifting landscape could learn a thing or two. Turns out I'm real bitter. I don't know where it's all come from.
You're on one today, that's for sure.
I've been cooped up in my house talking to a 6-year-old for 5 days. I think that's the problem. Yeah. Basically in the idea that like not everyone wants to take their training really fucking seriously, right? And I think again this is kind of indicative of the difference in our audiences, in that a lot more of the people I'm talking to these days are more interested in a balanced approach to performance across multiple areas, rather than just the pure powerlifting aspects of it. But it's that idea of like and my lifetime mediocre athlete as a reference point, Tom Musgrove, said this one where he was talking to someone at work. They were like, oh, you must be like really committed to that powerlifting thing. He's like, yeah, like I'm 3 days a week committed. And I was like, that's such a beautiful encapsulation of it, right? Like it doesn't have to be this all encompassing thing, but that kind of leads me to this thought about at what level do you think there's a cap? Is there a cap for how far can you take your performance without the all-consuming nature of it taking over your life, right? Because I think we all know and we all see elite level lifters all over the internet whose lives are, I can't speak from personal experience, but are largely dominated by their entire training ecosystem, right? I talk to lots of people in their 30s and 40s who are like, I can fucking barely make it to the gym 2 days a week. And talking to someone like that about exact percentages or the number of grams of protein they're eating today and things like that, it's just a fucking waste of time, right? Like it's the wrong conversation to have. But yet so much of the fitness industry is built on this discussion of this is the way, this is what you have to do to be really good. I'm way more interested in what's the least amount of work we can do and be really good, right? Because I think for most adults who have lives and responsibilities outside of lifting weights, that's actually probably a far more useful conversation than how much training can I handle, that kind of discussion.
Yeah, it's an interesting one to unpack because I think it's actually very relevant for the serious powerlifter at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because the way the wheels have turned in terms of what programming looks like, if we're to use terms like frequency or volume, and when people refer to low or high frequency or volume, I actually believe that what people these days, if you went up to the average coach or lifter and mentioned as low volume, is a relevant moderate volume for most people to do really well in the sport of powerlifting. I think the high volume approach is probably way too high. And I've been having a lot of back and forth with Mike
It's
T
the
lately.
Shaco, but it's like, you look back at the Shaco programs we used to run. There was like fucking, oh yeah, here's 6 sets of 5 squats, 7 sets of 5 bench, and then 4 more sets of 5 squats.
The
all above 80%.
The wild pyramids, the like sandwich of squat bench squat or bench squat bench.
Deadlift bench deadlift always fucking ripped my soul to pieces.
Man, it's just crazy how shit you would feel like picking up the bar again, and it's only like an hour later. Just ridiculous. I've been having a lot of back and forth with Mike T lately, and it's Mike T, so like I can't say anything dumb, and it's been forcing me to think a lot about this stuff.
I love that
on a level that I haven't challenged myself to think about in quite a while. So he had made a post or a story basically saying that at a minimum you must train bench twice a week, and what he meant was like bench muscles or pressing basically. And I sort of clapped back at that. I'm like, where did this figure come from? How did you come up with that? And then he's like, oh no, I mean this, and it was a cool way of clarifying, but it made me step away and think, because if I was to look back anecdotally just on a completely narrow view of my own experience as a coach in the last 12 years and the amount of results that we've produced and all that sort of stuff, I would lean onto the statement that intensity is king over frequency, and that your relative intensity drops dramatically when your frequency increases.
100%.
And what I've found, and because when I try only to say this stuff when I'm presenting a result, because then it's irrefutable. Like I posted Colton deadlifting whatever 420,000 reps the other day, and I'm like, we did this with low frequency. No one can come back and say low frequency doesn't work, because it's like fucking look at it. But I know for a fact that there's people that would immediately be like, well, so-and-so's on gear. Well, so-and-so lifts this amount of weight, so it's not relevant. Well, so-and-so's a male, so-and-so's a female. I've found this with all populations, all genders across the board, is that what would be deemed as a lower frequency or a lower volume works really well.
Yeah, 100%.
And so I was just going to finish by saying people can make ridiculous gains with what these days is deemed as not enough.
Man, I agree. I think the last 5 or 6 years of my coaching experience, my programs have just like maybe reduced in total volume by 2/3 because the emphasis is like just fucking train harder. Like every time I've had someone, and it's happened a few times in the last couple of months, where I've had some people be like, I feel like I'm maybe not doing enough work. I'm like, fuck yeah, let's go. Film the top set of every lift you do this week, and they all come back and they're like, oh, at 9. I'm like, cool. Here's 5 reps. All 5 of them move at the same speed. That's a 6, bro. Try harder. And they're like,
exactly.
Oh. And then they come back to me 2 weeks later and they're like, I was wrong.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, exactly. You're just not trying hard.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things, without being the cocky, arrogant cunt that I can be, I am. And I occasionally, I've said to a few people, like every now and again, I feel like maybe once a year I have to go through a period in the gym where I like commit to a 6-8 week period of like really hard gym lifting stuff. And I do it deliberately when people are around. Like I make a point to train in the afternoons, because every now and again There's a collection of people that just need to be reminded they all are fucking lazy, not training hard enough. And I hate that end of the motivation world, right? Like we've talked about this before. I fucking despise it. But it's not like, oh, I'm some tough cunt. Like, no, I'm just showing that like intensity is the thing that matters. It like you can do 2 days a week and do 8 hard sets across 2 days a week and you'll make progress as long as they're really fucking hard, right? And you're working hard and all of that shit. And it's those discussions where increasingly they're the most important discussion I have. Like you don't have to commit to 9 days a week of training. You don't need 16 hours a week. You just need to train really fucking hard for maybe an hour 2 or 3 times a week. Like much more than that, you probably don't need it. And if you want to, that's fine, right? Like that's the other end of the spectrum is I think we all came at it, and I'm having this thought as I express it, so stick with me. But I reckon we all came at it as people who fucking love lifting weights. Like we all just love spending time in the gym. So we're like, well, this is the only fucking way to do it because we all only know how to train 5 days a week and feel like absolute shit 95% of the time outside of the gym and struggle to walk upstairs. But we're really strong and it's great. But my elbows hurt constantly. And these days, like, and I think for me, that's actually what's changed is like, I just don't want to spend that much time in the gym anymore. Yeah. I don't want to train for more than like 45 minutes. I get bored. I'm like, all right, fucking, I'm done. And I can go ride my bike for 5 hours and have a great time doing that. But that has shifted my programming approach because I now actually get it that like me complaining about people not doing the program was actually just because my program sucked.
Yeah.
And instead of being like, here's 2 hours of intense hard work, it's like, here's one really hard exercise, 3 to 5 sets tops. Here's one secondary exercise that's kind of hard, but not super hard. And then some other shit. And then like, if you can't get that done in 90 minutes, you're not trying hard enough. And you should probably get it done in an hour. And we probably don't need to change anything in there for like 6 weeks at a minimum, as long as you're trying really hard every week.
Yep. Yep. It's the bitter irony of too long spent powerlifting is that you start to believe you should always have something left in the tank on everything. And you teach yourself to train really soft.
Yeah.
Like you're meant to walk away from your squat or your bench or deadlift without maxing out. So you're taught to train really, and that part's true. But then everyone sandbags their accessories to the max.
Yeah, I stopped programming anything less than a 9 RPE on accessories not that long ago because I'm like, well, every time I'm like 7, people are like, oh, cool, I did one warm-up set and that was my hard set for that. It's like, no, bro, like a 7's still a hard set. Like, you know, and that's, I think been the downfall of RPE is it not being explained that like, we assume like, oh, 7 RPE, that's easy work. Like, yeah, but like, relatively easy in that it's not a 1 rep. It's still fucking hard.
Sure.
Like a proper triple at an 8 RPE, like a true 8 RPE, that third one's tough, gonna be hard.
For sure.
Like that's a 5 rep max load you're doing triples with. Like that's not an easy load to be working with.
Yeah.
But I think too many people have, and I'm guilty of this as much as anyone else, in the coaching realm have I know the difference in those numbers intuitively, right? Because I've hit all of them.
You've felt it all.
Yeah. But the average person doesn't. And so they see like max effort, not max effort. And there's no like nearly max effort or like, you know, really quite hard, but sustainable effort. And it's the same thing actually interesting with cardio stuff as well, right? The same thing happens with heart rate numbers. Like I literally just this morning responded to one of my online clients who's gotten into more cardio and some running stuff about, he was like asking a question about specific numbers in the heart rate zones. It's like, man, like here's a video about how heart rate zones don't actually matter that much. Like use the talk test instead, it works better. The heart rate number is great. And I can tell you what my heart rate is within probably 5 or 10 beats at almost any time, especially mid like ride or something. I can give you a pretty good estimate because I've just spent fucking hours staring at my head unit, watching my heart rate. And I know what the number feels like.
Yeah.
It's not the number that matters. It's the effort and the intensity of that feeling, right?
Exactly.
And the RPE, the heart rate, the fucking number on the bar, right? And that's the other misconception I think we get with powerlifting is this idea that it's all about the number on the bar, which it really isn't because
it's the training effect.
about 90% of your training experience, the number on the bar is fucking irrelevant. Maybe that last 10%, the last 4 to 6 weeks, then we care about the numbers specifically. We're a bit more rigid, perhaps. But before that, it's all just like, are you training hard enough? Is the number high enough to be in the right intensity window, right? The number's just there because it's the easiest way to track it. The heart rate, you want a heart rate monitor. You want to learn what those zones feel like. So when I say go run for an easy hour, you don't have to look at your heart rate. You can just be like, yeah, cool, this was an easy run. I know what that feels like, right? And I think that it's that whole sort of murky, and this is where people are, RPE is hard. It's not. It just takes experience, and you have to be able to explain it well. And I think that's actually the thing that makes RPE hard, is most of us just really suck at explaining it because we've never been able to articulate the idea that the actual numbers are just there as a way of measuring things, right? Like they're just there to help you understand the process. In the end, we could take all of the numbers away and just go with like, do this many reps and I want it to feel reasonably hard. And you just teach people what reasonably hard feels like. And a lot of people have to learn what reasonably hard feels like.
Yeah.
Because especially if you come to anything like strength sports a little bit later in life, if you haven't been very active, I was an athlete my whole life. I've been pushing hard, training hard, all that kind of stuff forever. So I know how to work really hard. I consistently see people like, oh man, that was so hard. It's like, that wasn't hard.
That wasn't
like
hard. You're fine.
You got a good 5 or 6 more reps to do there. And I think the more you can expose people early in their experience to that feeling of like proper push hard, get to failure, the better. I reckon a lot of us have been guilty of gatekeeping that in the powerlifting setting because of that mentality of like leave a bit in the tank, that kind of thing. And the same sort of argument around like the technique and safety aspects of it. Like people are hesitant to work really hard because it seems scary. They've been told it can be dangerous. But I think if you've got a good training setup, you can put people in a position where they work really hard in an environment that's incredibly safe and controllable, right? I don't need you to go to a 9.5 RPE every time in your back squats, but when we put you on a fucking leg press, you better be working hard, right? Like, because it's just a seated squat, and it's meant to be hard.
Yeah.
And so that's where I have differentiated in my like training philosophy around output exercises and developmental exercises, right? Output exercise, like work hard, push hard. Yeah, there's a technique component, but we assume you're pretty good at it. Just work hard.
Yeah.
Developmental is like the more specific skill aspects, like pin squats and things like that. That's about, I want to rate limit your total output here a little bit based around the performance of that variant and make it about learning the skill here so you can apply it in the output section. If you can communicate that well, then people understand the difference and can work hard where it's needed and focus on the skill aspect where that's needed, right? And then ultimately you just get to a point where it's like, cool, work fucking hard. But in the end, that's what it comes down to. Work really fucking hard for a long time and you'll get stronger.
For sure. For sure. There's certain circumstances that you come across that force you to do that kind of thing. The first thing that comes to mind is like travel. When you travel around and you're forced to train at a different gym. And so now you can't measure your perfect like pin on the stack that you know is your weight for that week. You just have to pick a weight and then go hard at it. And you're time restricted. You have to get it done quickly. You have to clump up a bunch of different body parts that you wouldn't normally clump up. Situations like that force you to zoom out and look at the bigger picture in terms of what actually matters. And you learn very quickly that training hard matters, training quick matters. And then you're like, I can do this. Well, if I can do it here, I can do it at home. Your workouts become quicker, better. It's what I love when you've got, recreational lifters, maybe not serious powerlifters. I love the ones that need to be held back, that don't have that off switch, that really want to get after it. Because it's a reminder of like, this person wants a result and their inherent automatic belief is that more is better. Sometimes we need to take a bit of a drink from that cup.
100%, man. I
was going to say, I've been training a lot. My squat bench deadlift volume is very low, and I've only really introduced in the last 2 weeks anyway. But it's going to stay low, and I'm doing the whole just 2 sets, super high intensity on most accessories, and then the low level accessories are smaller body parts, like to failure every set.
100%.
Like the sessions are super quick, and I feel worked, and it's so nice. Like,
yeah, I was gonna say, do you get to the end of the session, you're like, fuck yeah, like, yeah, I worked hard.
I feel like I've trained versus 10 years ago, spending quote unquote 3 hours training, where most of it is just dicking around and walking out of the gym fine. You know, like now it's like I train and I'm like, I'm fucked. Like I have to plan what's okay to do or not do after training based on the fact that I know I'm going to be fucked. So I keep all the low cognition tasks to the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And that for me was actually what has been fun about the cardio side, is it's learning to push hard in a different environment. Like I genuinely for a long time didn't think I knew how to work hard like that. Like I was just like, I'm an anaerobic athlete. I can do triples at 75% for 6 to 7 weeks, but can't do anything more than 5 reps. It's too hard. And now I reckon in almost every endeavor I can outwork pretty much everyone I know, because I've found that switch. Like I know how to find that switch on a bike, running. I've known for a very long time how to find that switch in a gym environment, but now I can find it somewhere else, and that capacity is really empowering. As much as I fucking hate that word, because it is this realization, like, yeah, cool, like. You might be thinner than me, you might be faster than me, but like I'm still pretty committed to the idea that I can outwork almost anyone. Because I've spent a really long time asking myself if I'm working hard enough. Like, was that as hard as I needed it to be? Did I really try as hard as I thought I did there? Or did I go into that being like, this weight's going to be an 8 RPE? Like it's one of the reasons I've actually stopped offering weight suggestions for weight ranges. For a while I did in my spreadsheet setups, I had like a top set and then drop sets calculated off the top set. And it would be like, 3 sets of 5, here's a high end, low end range, right? But everyone would just do like in the middle or at the top, and they do the same 3 sets or that weight. If you're a reasonably strong powerlifter and you have 3 sets of 5 and they're all meant to be at 9 RPE, I would genuinely be surprised if they were all true 9 RPE sets at the same weight.
Exactly.
Because if you're actually fucking strong and good at what you do in the powerlifting setting, you can't repeat a 9 RPE 5 rep set.
You're done.
Like not at the same load. Because if you can, it wasn't a fucking 9 RPE.
Exactly.
Like I refuse to engage in the prospect that was. Because I've been there. It's just not.
Yeah.
I always use the video of there's like one of the last comps I did. I think it was the last comp I did. It's my last squat in training before the comp. It was 242 and a half, and I was supposed to do it for a double in sleeves. And I remember unracking it and being like, my belt feels a bit loose. That's weird. And I like have a very quick descent. I threw myself at the ground, went to push, and it just fucking hit a wall and like just stops basically, right? And I finished it. I got to the top, I was like, racket. I was like, oh fuck, that was harder than I thought. And I weighed myself and I was like 3 kilos lighter. I'd like not eaten enough over the weekend and just like lost 3 kilos, and so felt really weak. And I timed it once, and it took 8 seconds to get from the bottom back to the top again. Right? Like I'll find it. I'll send you the link. But it's 8 seconds. It's like, let's all sit here and count to 8. Like that's a fucking long time to be pushing. And I show it to people all the time. They're like, oh my God. I'm like, yeah, you don't know what a 10 RPE feels like. Until you've pushed and you were like, oh, I think it's actually stopped. I'm just going to keep trying. And it's never stopped. It was actually just still very slowly going. And in that moment, I remember being like, I'm not going to miss this, but holy fuck, that was harder than I thought it was going to be. And I had the confidence to keep pushing because I'd been in that environment before. I knew what that feeling was, that kind of thing. And I think that's the experience that most people lack early in their training piece, is that feeling of like what it actually feels like to keep pushing against something that feels like it's not moving. And I think a lot of people, I've seen a lot of women really struggle with this in deadlifts, especially because you go to push and it just feels like it's not moving, and then it starts moving and it goes up at 1,000,000 miles an hour. But it's more generally people who haven't had that athletic experience of pushing into something. Like, man, I packed scrums for 10 years. I've been pushing at things that were literally fixed to the ground, like a scrum machine that's literally secured to the ground and doesn't move. And you've just got to push against it for 20 seconds. Like that experience, I think, is what's helped me know what that limit feels like. And now having explored that in another avenue as well is really interesting, because I still don't think I've found it. right? Every time I'm like, man, that was really hard. I'm like, oh, was it? Could you have gone a bit faster? And yeah, that's the exciting bit of it. But I think a lot of people come into powerlifting training in general without that fire to like question their own ability. Like, was that as hard as I could work? Was I trying hard enough? And I don't know whether we're going to continue this into a therapy session, but maybe that's because I've been told I'm not working hard enough my whole life. And instead, I'm trying really hard to question that myself. And so now I know that it's much easier, right?
And I know I'm pushing good in training blocks when I develop a fear of certain exercises. Like I'll never be scared of squat, bench, deadlift, but like now we have like it's a Rogers Squat Pro. It's a Chinese ripoff of that. And it messes you up big time. And yeah, it's so nice to have developed a fear of the set because you know what it felt like going to basically failure the week before. So you're scared as fuck. And I've gotten the habit of forcing that fear on even further by as soon as my brain is like, okay, we're done and racks the thing, I don't allow myself to put it down, unrack it and keep going. Yeah. And like forcing myself to find the true 1 RIR or 2 RIR or whatever it is.
Absolutely.
And redeveloping that fear has been so refreshing.
Yeah. There's a really great video that Mike Israetel did on YouTube somewhere where he talks about this, and it's him doing pendulum squats.
Yes, I've seen
and he's like, yeah, I'm going to do 3 sets. The first one, I'm just going to be like real casual. I'm going to push hard, and it's like all of these are going to be like 1 rep in the tank or whatever it is. He's like, cool. The first one's like super chill, and he stops when it kind of gets hard. And then the second one, he's like, I'm going to like focus up a little bit and like push really hard. And he gets like, 8 more reps or something like that. Yeah. And then the third one, he's like, now we're going to a dark place. And he starts like fucking talking to himself in Russian and and properly goes there and fucking pushes. And he comes off it and he's like dry heaving and barely able to stand. And it's like, yeah, cool. You don't have to go to that place all the time.
Yeah.
But if you've never been there, you're probably not training as hard as you think. And I get the same experience now on bikes riding up hills, man. Like I live next to fucking Mount Ainslie. It's a like 25-minute climb and the last 500 meters is like a wall. So it's just like, it gets worse and worse the further you go. I've only ridden up it fully like 3 times. Yeah. Because it's fucking hard, man. Like committing to, and that's the crazy thing about endurance stuff is like, you talk about being scared of a set and it's like over in maybe a minute and a half. If that. Dude, being scared of like for the next 30 minutes, my life's going to be really quite unpleasant.
Yeah.
And like, no one's forcing me up that fucking hill. Like, I'm not winning anything by doing it. I'm not even very fast. And I think that experience is the really liberating one of like, I'm only doing this because I want to see if I can keep going and I want to see if I can go harder. But for me, it's been the evolution in my training has been the permission not to go hard when I don't want to. Like for a long time, I think it was I need to be going hard all the time. And now I'm like, you don't need to train that hard at the moment because you're not really training for anything and you're just doing it for fun. And like, I'm not chasing the best progress I can get immediately. I'm just continuing to do it because I like doing it. And I think, again, once you've had both ends of that experience, then you can find the periods of time where each end of the spectrum works for you, right? Like in that fucking period up to what was going to be my 24-hour race last year, I was training fucking hard, dude. I was doing 10 to 12 hours a week on a bike, like going through hundreds of grams of carbs an hour in those sessions and was fucking exhausted constantly. Now I'm like, maybe I'm doing like 5 hours a week on the bike, lifting a bit, having some fun, pretty chill about it. But I think the thing that wrecks people is the all or nothing approach to either end of that spectrum. Oh, you can't train hard because like recovery and stress adaptation, or you have to train hard all the time.
Yeah.
Actually, both of those are incredibly valid experiences and have a play for both ends of the spectrum when you need it.
Yeah.
The person you're talking to in their early 20s who's just fucking super excited about powerlifting and is a student who lives at home, I'm just going to tell you all about how hard you're not training and I'm going to make you do as much work as you can because you can, right?
Yeah.
But that like mid-30s single mother who's really fucking struggling to get into the gym more than once every 2 weeks doesn't need to be yelled at about how they're not working harder, right?
Exactly.
They need to be given permission to go into the gym, do 10 minutes on a bike, realize today is not the day and go home. And I think, again, from a coaching perspective, if you're a coach out there, take this from it. You need to be able to understand what the person in front of you needs on that spectrum, right?
Yeah.
Do they need to be pushed forward, or do you need to pull them back a little bit? Or do they need both, just at different times? Because that's actually the reality. Sometimes even the hardest workers in the room need to be like, was that as hard as you think it was? You don't have to be a dick about it. Just be like a little bit condescending and you'll be fine. Because most of those people have a huge chip on their shoulder and have something to prove. And so if you question them, they'll show you they can work harder.
Exactly.
And I know that because I'm one of those people.
Exactly.
But there are also other people who just need to be like, no, it's cool. You don't have it today and that's okay. Go home. And yeah, the quicker you learn that, the better you are as a coach.
Man, it's that revelation that comes with, again, maturity of you don't have to train, you get to train.
Yeah, fucking both, dude.
A lot of reverence around it that comes with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Every fucking time I swing my leg over my bike and roll out of my house cold in the dark and the sun comes up, the last like 3 weeks, I have probably on a dozen different times gone around a corner and been like, whoa, out loud, because the sun is shining and the huge smile on my face, there's music in my ears, and I get to go ride my bike for 2 hours. Like, sick. I think that experience of the joy of doing it is what everyone should be chasing, and that's the thing that's going to keep you doing it for a long time.
I think it's a good place to finish.
Excellent.
Love it.
Goodbye,
Thank
friends.
you. Bye.
Bye.